Hey, Alex, a lawyer and a financial advisor walk into a bar.
Oh, and then what happens, Dave?
Well, the question comes up, how do I protect my business when some of my employees resign or they want to move to a competitor?
Oh, uh-oh. Well, you got to make sure that your employees are all just loving working for you and they never resign. So I've never had to deal with that. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big one right now because the labour force is so tight. So I know my clients are finding it hard to fill positions anywhere. And one of the big challenges, obviously, is keeping everyone who they do have with them. But I guess it's inevitable, especially when the labour market's tight, that people are going to leave. People are going to chase, unrealistic salaries, or they're going to. Sometimes it's a geographical thing. They want to move closer to where they live, or whatever it is.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when you start to get people, they're like, oh, no, but I've worked from home for this period of time.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying this, and I only have to come in 2 or 3 days a week. But now, you're asking me to come back 4 days a week, and the commute, and that's really hard to say to someone.
Yeah.
That they'll argue and say, I really love working here, but it's taking me 45 minutes to get to the premises.
Yeah.
Can't I keep working from home 4 days a week? You're like,
If you give people rights, or benefits, it's very hard to take them away again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if they've been doing that their whole life, then so be it. I know we've got our practice manager, was driving in from out west, across the West Gate into the city every day for her whole career, 20 years she's been doing this.
Yep.
And she started working from home and said, I never want to come back again. I can understand that, but it was only because she'd had the working from home that she'd formed that view. We've been able to work with her to she can basically do it all from home.
Accommodate that. Yeah.
Right, but it depends on the job. Obviously, it's not suitable for everyone. So what do you do if one of your employees resign or is poached and starts to work for a competitor or works elsewhere? The first thing you do is you hit the rewind button. You rewind before they did that, and you fix their employment contracts. Hopefully, you do this now before people resign. Because their employment contract's the main thing you can do. There's sort of a practical aspect to it, which we can talk about, and there's a legal aspect to it, and I guess there's a market aspect to it as well. But from the legal aspect, I'll deal with that first because that's my thing. But you want to have in your employment agreement, you want to be clear about what they need to do when they resign. So can they work for a competitor? Can they compete generally? Can they poach customers? Can they poach other employees? What intellectual property what do they have to return? What intellectual property is yours? What's theirs? All that sort of stuff. That all needs to be set out in the employment agreement.
Yeah, but then I'll come back on that when you hear of this and like, well, that's great. I've got this employment agreement that they have signed, and it does state all those things that you mentioned, and then they turn around and have 2 words for you.
No, that's a thank.
And it's not. They're not complimentary.
Yes,
because they kind of turn around and go, yeah, right. Well, one, can you afford to sue them if you're going to take over some of these things? But also, how tight, are the courts going to be in that situation? I agree with you. I mean, part of it is taking that rewind and saying, I've got a good employment agreement in place, and therefore I can, at least say to a person when they're leaving, just let me remind you of, that there's a moral obligation that sits here, but there is, especially if they leave in good terms. I think that's always hard. If someone resigns for bad purposes, I think that's always hard. But again, I think business is business and personal relationships are personal relationships.
Right. Yeah.
You can have the watertight employment agreement, clearly that would have been drafted by Taurus Legal.
Those heroes.
Correct. Unbelievable. But all of a sudden, they're like, I know, but
I'm still not going to do that.
I know, I might back away for a bit. But.
I understand that. There's certainly a difference between what's legal and what people actually do, and whether or not you want to go off to court and enforce these things is a whole different question to what they say. But I suppose at the first instance, if you've got it in a written document, you've got a set of rules that they agreed to at one point. So you've got a little bit of moral currency there. You can say, well, this is the agreement, right? This is the deal.
And we did say this when we loved each other.
Yeah, that's right. So that's a start. And, obviously if you've got a good relationship with them, that'll carry some weight. If you don't have a good relationship, they might say, well, I'm not going to do that anyway. So there's legal options, enforcement type options. There's also practical things you can do. If the employment agreement requires you to return your laptop or your mobile phone or your documents or whatever, if you can get those back, again, obviously relationship's an issue if they just run off with them all, but unlikely. Normally they do return things even if there's some bad blood.
But is that so? Just a query on that. So the topic we're talking about today in our podcast is how do we protect your business when an employee resigns or moves to a competitor?
Yeah.
What happens if you have provided, say, a mobile phone and some computer equipment, and that may be a desktop and some screens if they were working from home, or it could be just a laptop?
Yeah.
Is the situation that if they do not return those items to you as they are company property, is that classified as theft?
Yeah, good question. So in most circumstances, it's not. Normally, if someone's got a right to hold something and then they hold it for longer than they should, then that's not a theft. A theft is where they take it and they knew when they took it they didn't have any right to it. You know what I mean? So you have to know it's not yours, whereas there can be some confusion between the employee and maybe it's made up confusion between the employee and the employer about what they need to return and the condition and when they need to return it and so on. Especially if you're dealing with, like, say, your own mobile phone. So you want to make sure all your employees have mobile phones that are paid for by, especially salespeople and people with client facing that are paid for by the company, and they're clearly company property, and there's some register. So you keep that tape, that chair, and that screen, and all that stuff is company property, especially with the working from home type stuff. And if they don't return it, then if you report it to the police are definitely not going to do anything. So you can the police. I mean, even if you could convince them that it was theft, which arguably it is, if they know they're not entitled to it for sure, then it actually can become theft. But the police certainly aren't going to go around and be grabbing a mobile phone
because they would just say that that's a employee-employer dispute.
People dispute.
Therefore, take it back as
lawyer.
Civil.
Yeah, ring up Alex; he'll sort you out.
Yeah,
and it'll cost you a bunch of money, right? So you don't necessarily want to go there. I think there's other things you can do though, like with a laptop, you can disconnect. You can have your IT people disconnect the laptop.
Yeah, the remote access if they've already had it. Yep.
And you can actually have people log on and wipe it.
Yep.
So it depends on your technology arrangements. But if you're dealing again with you've got to look at your people and say, if you're dealing with, say, your head of sales who has all your customer relationships in their pocket, and all of the database on their computer, it might make sense to have an arrangement where you can, if you need to, wipe that computer.
Yes.
Or they have a computer which is...
So that goes back to the smarts. It's not just your agreement between your employers. That's another step behind that says, okay, if I am putting some third-party equipment out there, what control mechanisms do I have in place within the organisation?
Right. Yeah, right. That's right. So it might be, obviously it's an arrangement when they finish, they turn up and hand it over. And if they won't hand it over, then maybe you remotely get on and wipe it. It's pretty rare. We don't see a lot of don't hand over computer. Normally people do hand over their gear. They might then go and try and remotely access the system, or might print out some stuff and keep it, or put it on a memory stick. That's all different, but it's pretty rare for them to just not hand over. And I mean, you could sue for that, and you would win, and it probably wouldn't be hugely expensive. But obviously, you don't want to go down that track. But if they're not even returning their gear, then you wonder what else are they doing. I mean, that's pretty bad. Pretty blatant. They're just going.
Well, that's a big red flag, really. If one of your past employees, and it probably depends upon how long they've been there, but you do hear of those stories that people have been. With businesses for years. And all of a sudden they discover something. It's like, wow, what happened there?
Well, that's right. Sometimes they return the computer or the computer, is getting repaired or something, and they discover that all of this information's been downloaded. We did one for a financial advisor once where one of the advisors had downloaded all of this confidential client information, which included passports of clients, very private information, banking details and stuff of clients. Put it on a memory stick, and then he eventually had a fight with the owner, and then he nicked off, and he went to a different financial advice firm, and then they contacted those clients, right? So that's all very bad, and that's exactly what you want to avoid. And that ended up in litigation, and we were able to prove through a forensic report that he downloaded all of this stuff, and it was all very bad for him. So there are things you can do, but I'd say
clearly that's not something that would happen on a regular basis. Or
like vaults.
Correct.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and these days, I mean, and this is probably an IT issue, but the cloud computing that I'm sure you use, Dave, and that all the wealth activists use.
Yep.
Which is only you.
Yep.
Is got a very good security, so you can see who's accessed what and when, and if people are accessing things they shouldn't, then it sends up a red flag. And our system's like that, so you can create what they used to call Chinese walls. I think they probably don't call them that anymore. That's probably not.
I think that's probably politically incorrect. Security walls and yeah.
Anyway, so. There is, putting aside the legal stuff, there's a lot of practical stuff you can do and should do to protect your IP and your customer relationships, because ultimately most businesses, what their value is their relationship with their customers, and and possibly with their suppliers, depending on what they do.
Yep.
And that's where the value is. So you've got to protect that, because that's what you sell if you sell the business, and that's what potentially. I know I used to say, why would you buy a business when you can steal it for free, right? And if you hire the right employees, you actually can often get a lot of the knowledge of the business. You can get you can get a lot of their relationships. You can sort of hire them in rather than buying them.
Well, that goes back to a lot of businesses where they're like, why would you, do you buy or build? If I've got, it's going to cost me $5 million to buy this business, but to buy the technology that this other business has, or it might cost me $15 million to start from scratch and develop the new stuff. I mean, again, that's where you start to see some of employees moving to a different organisation, because someone's paying them more than what they're currently on. But the point of them being paid more is to bring across the relationships that they hold.
Right. Yeah. So, and let me talk about that. You can't stop someone from using their skills that they've got to earn a living, right? So you can restrain someone from approaching particular customers, or from using intellectual property, like say your pricing list or something, to undercut you. You can stop them from poaching your own staff. If they move off. So there are things you can do, and they're all legally enforceable things.
So what about the one that pops up a fair bit? There's probably more so within some of the professional services area, but the gardening leave, as they refer to it.
Oh yeah. You can stick someone on gardening leave for a while, so they just don't work at all, but you still pay them.
Yeah, or there's a period of time from your departure from your organisation that they cannot work in a similar industry or along those lines. I mean, are they really? I mean, my understanding is, and I know a few people that this has happened to them, that they're pretty enforceable from that point of view, this gardening leave component. But most people are also quite happy to take the gardening leave, which is, I haven't heard of any over 3 months, more than 3 months, but correct me if I'm wrong, whether you could. I would have thought it would be difficult to constrain someone to, be feeling as though they can earn a living for more than 3 months.
Yeah, so the latest case law, which was about a law firm, of course it was, law firms fighting over lawyers departing one firm and going to another, and of course they all end up in court, was the determination was 3 months was the maximum in that context that the court would enforce.
Yeah,
That's
right.
Every lawyer everywhere, 3 months is the way it's going to work. But in this context, it was a partner moving from one firm to another, and 3 months of them avoiding competing was the maximum.
Yep.
I can't actually remember. It might have even just been 3 months to not approach any of the clients on the list.
Yeah.
So there's a real difference in law. So the court will enforce the narrowest possible interpretation of the provision that they can, and they'll strike out anything that's too onerous, too harsh. And so what you want is a narrow interpretation that gives you the best outcome. So the court will, or it's important to distinguish between competing generally, and normally that's the courts are reluctant to enforce that or enforce it for very long, because competing generally is a pretty tough restraint, right?
Yeah.
You might restrain someone from approaching your top 10 customers, right? And that might be enforced for a whole year, because that you've got relationships specifically with those people.
But again, I mean, from a legal point of view, you can say, I've got this, it's drafted in this employment agreement, and we've got all these scenarios. Is it a point that you just say, depending upon how valuable some of the customers that might be for the business, of how hard you would push on that? I mean, you can put that constraint on someone, but you've got to enforce it. And therefore, how do you really know which way it's going? And if you do lose a major... But that also then comes back to, you can talk about the relationships with your existing customers. The employment agreement you have with your employees. But it also comes back to the business to then say, well, probably shouldn't allow a single point of contact within my business to be with my primary customer. Like I need to have multiple relationships inside that organisation to minimise my risk.
Yeah, depth of relationship. You want to have your head of sales might be friends with or really close with their head of purchasing or whatever, but you also might have your accounts teams that work together and all sorts of other people. There might be multiple salespeople who deal with each other or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, legal's just one aspect, right? I like to spit on that because that's my main wheelhouse. But absolutely, there's a whole lot of practical things and commercial things. And I certainly say to our clients often, don't beat them in court, beat them in the marketplace, right? So you must going out and talking, when an employee leaves, go and speak to all your customers who had dealings with that employee and explain what's happened and hopefully give them a new representative who's, really good and who can bridge the gap quickly if there is a gap. So that if then they get approached by that old person, they'll stay with you. And certainly my experience actually is customers often stick with the incumbent more readily than you'd think.
I agree.
Yeah,
especially if you can nurture that relationship. Because in the end, it's like, but I like the way you guys have done it. It's just that Alex was my key contact, and he's left. Who's my key contact now? We're still working on that. Then I'll start to drift off.
The big issues are when you drop the ball at the same time as they get an approach from Alex, who's moved to a new firm. Whereas if you keep giving the good service or the good product or whatever it is that they like about you anyway, hopefully the personality and the personal relationship of that salesperson can be replaced. And certainly I agree. You need multiple points of contact, and you need to nurture the relationships immediately when someone resigns. I mean, hopefully you do it anyway, but if you're not, you look at the relationships that employee had and try to shore them up as best you can immediately, because
that can also go back to, it's not just your own employee that you are, that are delivering a service. You see it on some of the retailers or organisations that have an individual that is the purchasing officer, or, with the retailers, they may have they're a buyer for a segment that you function in. And the big retailers then like to rotate those buyers around so the relationships don't become too ingrained with two individuals.
Okay.
So it's being across that as well. It's not just an employee departing. It can be an employee from another organisation that then has an impact upon your business. So it's being aware and trying to managing that, because that employee with a customer that you have worked with, that employee departs. Therefore you lose it. So it's not just the control within your own business, it's the customers. And that's a really hard one, because sometimes a new purchasing officer is put in place that you may or may not get along with, but they're still buying your products, but you just don't have as strong a relationship with the purchasing person.
Well, and it can work in the reverse. I mean, some of our best clients that we've ever got have been because the in-house lawyer they have, or the in-house CFO or whoever it is that was our contact, goes somewhere else. And they aren't happy with the supplier at the legal supplier at the new place, so they contact us, and we've got this relationship, so we follow them, and hopefully keep the old relationship as well. Sometimes we lose that because it is the relationship, and in professional services, there's the personal relationship is stronger and more important probably than in other industries, where they might be more concerned with your logistical capability or the your product itself, what it is, or the brand or whatever it is. Professional services is more prone to that than ever, but it does go both ways. I think it's really just something you got to be kind of alert to it, and we've had plenty of clients who've suffered because they've lost a key employee, and they've also, some of our clients have picked up new customers as a result of hiring an employee. So it's gone both ways. But
also, I think what's important is that as much as there can be some real frustrations with an employee leaving and potentially, you lose a customer through that, it can also be a real positive, because you can then sit back and reflect upon your own business. What are some of the things that I probably should be doing or could do going forward that may, negate that occurring again in the future, or it just gives you, because sometimes it is very easy to become, you become comfortable, maybe complacent. Yeah, that's probably a bit hard, but you can get comfortable. It's like, no, this is all going well. Yeah. But for whatever reason, someone chooses to make a change. Yeah. That is for a whole range of different reasons. Like,
and some of them are unavoidable.
It's just life goes on. Yep. But you can then sit back and go, you know what? That's taught me a really strong lesson as I'm trying to grow my business or it's moving along. How do I keep those relationships that it is not always an individual dependent?
Yeah, well, and I noticed it's a life cycle thing. Sometimes you're a startup, and then you might be a growing business for some time, and maybe that continues for a long time. But then you come to sort of a level of maturity. A lot of our clients have come to a level of maturity, and at that mature level, you want to actually make sure you don't go backwards. You want to protect what you've got, and a lot of your job is protecting what you got. And I think obviously we're all optimistic, and you all think next year is going to be 5% better than this year. But in fact, next year might
be less and less work while you do it.
Yeah, that's right. And so, I mean, part of what we talked about in quite a few episodes of the podcast is not being dependent on one person.
Yes,
is a key thing for your business, and a lot of businesses are really dependent on the business owner. So I know that's not about employees, but if the business owner gets sick or has a heart attack because they've been working so hard, then it really stuffs the business. And so you need that kind of depth in your business, and I think stopping and considering what happens if someone leaves, or perhaps if someone leaves, using that as a touchstone to actually review, well, what impact has it had, and how could I have run systems better so that this won't have so much of an impact on me. I mean, you really want to be in a place where anyone can come and go, and the business just rolls on.
And I agree, and that is absolutely that's the ideal situation, but that is always a challenge, and I think that's the direction for any business is, okay, if I lost any person in this business, would it have an impact? And I think anyone leaving any organisation has an impact. Yeah. It just comes back to how severe is that impact.
Yeah, that's right. So what have we done to mitigate the risk in the first place? What have we done to, shore up our relationships? What have we done, to make sure our legal protections are good, to make sure that we've communicated what's allowed and not allowed, so that we've got a best chance of the person doing the right thing, make sure the managers are treating people well, and like everything, a lot of it comes down to communication. And if you have people leaving on good terms that you communicated well with, they won't do the wrong thing by you. But sometimes about education, you need to know, well, what a lot of people, I think we see it a lot. People go, oh, but that's all my information. I know lawyers say, oh, I created that contract. That's mine. And you're like, yeah, if you created the contract when you're working for someone else, then that's theirs. So you just need to educate people about, well, what the information on your home laptop, if it's work information, like a customer list, that's work. That work owns that. Not
Yes.
So, and people might not want to do the wrong thing, but just don't kind of realise that, that's a bit cheeky. So,
well, I mean, even some of those rule changes that have occurred with working in the office, working from home.
Yeah.
What are the requirements? And that again, I think is a real issue. I mean, you gave the example before about an employee having to travel and now no longer travelling, but what does that look like, and how people are making their changes? I mean, that is, again, how do you protect your business from those things? And I think across so many businesses, people are a key part of every business.
Yeah.
And it's not always the technical knowledge that you have. It's all of these other issues that you've got to kind of address. And there's no easy single silver bullet.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think if you talk to me, you talk to a lawyer, we go, oh, you got to do all the legal stuff. And you're like, well, hang on. Even if I do all the legal stuff, aren't I still at risk?
Correct.
Actually, yes. And so there's a whole lot of practical stuff. There's a whole lot of there's system stuff. I mean, we've just dealt with a client the other day who an ex-employee left on bad terms. They left and they returned everything, and it was all hunky-dory. But then we recently discovered that they'd accessed since they'd left, they'd accessed the system, and there was some loophole. They had 5 or 6 different systems, and this particular system they still had the password for, and it hadn't been disallowed or whatever. And that was a system that has all their pricing and all their customers, and it's very sensitive, right? And we don't know what they've done with it, but we know they've accessed it. So that's bad, right? Very bad. And this was, I mean, as it happens, this particular company is a very large national company. And so, that's that they could, and we think we don't know where they're working, but we think they're working for a competitor. So they could be taking all that information to the competitor. So we get ahead and write to the competitor, and we write to the employee and say, look, we know you've accessed the system. Let us know what you've done with the information, because we and we're working through that. But their employer, who's potentially going to get in trouble for it, has been very responsive. The employee hasn't, but the employer has, because they don't want to have a fight with us. We're one of them.
So the topic that we're talking about is how do you protect your business when an employer resigns?
Yeah.
So is that another side? Is that if you as an employer bring over an employee from another business, even though they may have said to you, "Oh, Alex, I've got all this price list, client list, whatever, I suppose, previous employer intellectual property." You, as the receiver of that information, have to be very careful as well, because therefore you're being brought into a potential conflict down the track. Even though they might say, "Well, that's just the way it goes, and I know the customer." Yeah, but you've got don't show me what the pricing spreadsheet is that you've got. Like, should you be in a position of not even? Like how do you manage? Because that is, again. There's a legal aspect and there's a practical aspect.
Right.
And I'm sure there's always that practical side that says, okay, we've got it, but, we don't want it to be embedded within our system. Yeah. Can I use it? If I look at it, does that mean that we've endorsed what's occurred? It's a really grey, or it's a difficult area, I think, in that space for anyone that's bought that information with them.
Yeah.
But do you want to receive it?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's right. It works in reverse. When you're hiring someone, you've got to be careful about what they can and can't do. They might say, "I've got this great client." And you're like, you're restrained from approaching that client or accepting work from that client for a while. So that's one aspect. But then if they've got this information, it's often pretty obvious that it's confidential information. If it was a list of customers or a price list from your competitor that wasn't on the website or anything, then that's obviously confidential. And so if you were to make use of that in your business, and that was proven, then that you'd be you'd be breaking the law, and you'd potentially, if you say then got a customer out of it, then if you made profit out of that customer, you'd potentially have to account that profit, as in hand over that profit to your competitor, which would be pretty uncool. Obviously, only if they go through the legal process. But even that, you can ring up the customer and say, "Look, this person has moved across and they've got all our information." The customers might go, "Well, I'm not going to deal with them if they do that sort of thing." So there is things you can do beyond just sue people or write demands or whatever. Most people, I think, have a sense of fair play and whatever, and they say, well, if you've got the secret herbs and spices to the KFC mix or whatever, then that stuff's secret, and you might maybe cook in your kitchen with it, but you're not going to sell it or use it for the benefit of your business. If you discovered to doing that, you might be in big trouble.
Yeah. And so this is, and again, I think it's interesting that we kind of you've got to look at it on both sides of the equation. Yeah. Not just, I'm bringing on this great person. Like, but actually, where have they got all this really interesting information that you want to kind of know about, but at the same time, you probably don't?
Yeah, well, in this particular case, if our client is going up for tenders for big jobs against this other side, and if our client, there's 5 or 6 tenders that are all going on at the same time, and if our client loses to this mob, 5 times in a row, and we can work out it's because they're 5% cheaper because they know what our tender price is. Then that could be real fireworks, right? Because the tenders are for quite large infrastructure jobs, so there's plenty of money involved, So that's all very bad, and could end up, in disputes which involve the client. Everyone, at that level of the kind of market, everyone just wants to stay away from that sort of stuff. So they may well drop this employee. They may well not hire him.
Because then it comes back to all of a sudden, there's enough for everybody. Yeah. Why? It comes back to this. Yeah. Really, let's compete for it, but not everyone can do every job. So that's why there's multiple players in the market. But everyone's got to make a clip along the way. But there's a point where it's like, hang on, are you just taking on work to keep people employed, but you're not making any money?
Yeah, well, and I think in this case they're thinking, well, we're going to hire this guy and he was going to be U-Butte, and now he's causing a lot of headaches for us, and we're potentially facing a dispute with our competitor. We don't want to get into all of this, and so there is some potential that they won't hire him; they'll just let him go, and then he'll be unemployed, right?
So that goes back to the question around how do you protect your business when employees resign? Yeah, as much as we're talking about that, I think it's important when we talk about the other side of that, if you do have an employee, a future employee coming to you from a competitor, to be really clear around this is our expectations, and we don't want you to be, bringing stuff that would be considered the competitor's intellectual property, because that puts us in a difficult position.
Yeah. We just don't want that sort of stuff. That's right. And if you do have it, you want to, maybe look at it on paper and then. Zzz.
Yeah, do you know? I agree. Like there's a real balance that you've got to be very, very careful with that scenario.
Yeah, that's right. Because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, and also you can undermine. I mean, the point of hiring that person, you can undermine that, and end up in a dispute that you don't want to end up in. You just wanted to hire a good employee, and so why risk all that stuff? Just hire the employee, use their skills, and you can use your industry knowledge. There's nothing protected about your
Correct.
customer service skills, your whatever. You just can't use specific information.
Correct.
You can't use the secret herbs and spices. The price.
Yeah. But to me, that also goes back to the integrity and character of the individual that you're taking on.
Right.
Because if they're going to do that to their previous employer, and they're coming to you, how do I know that they're not going to then do that to me as the employer? In a few years' time, once they've picked up. Do you know what I mean? It's always a really good.
I didn't think of that, but you're quite right. Yeah, I mean, why would you hire someone if they'll do it? If they'll do it with you, they'll do it to you. Is that
Correct. So again, it's a really hard one.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you think we should sort of talk about to cover off? What you can do to protect yourself?
To protect yourself if an employee leaves or is poached or goes to a competitor, you want to kind of plan ahead for what that looks like, and hopefully do that before anyone leaves.
Yep.
Let's get the legal protections and the practical protections in place. The communication piece, get the depth of contact with your customers. The more than one person, and then. Beyond that, I think if it happens, just manage it as best you can. I'd be focused mainly on the marketplace and the practicalities than on the legal aspects. But obviously, the legal's a fallback if you need to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the final point in that is to question the person as to where some of the information that they're bringing to you, has been sourced from.
Sure. Yeah. Because
it's a bit like, where is the source of proceeds? Like where, source of funds in an investment world, from an anti-money laundering, where have you obtained that money from? Like, is it from employment? Is it from investments? But is it from some form that is perhaps inappropriate? So you've got to cover it off from there.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, Alex, just, the banter was absolutely on fire today. So as we close out our conversation, I would like to thank Alex from Taurus Legal Management. He can be contacted via LinkedIn at Alex Martin or via the website tauruslawyers.com.au.
Thanks, Dave. And I'd like to thank Dave Murdoch, the wealth activist from Paxton Bridge. And you can contact Dave at Dave Murdoch on LinkedIn or on paxtonbridge.com. Perfect.
Thank you, Alex. A pleasure once again. I hope you're all enjoying the banter of today and previous episodes and future. We shall all catch up with you soon.
See you next time.